Welcome to Tyrompers No Limit Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Tyrompers No Limit Podcast, episode number 97. Thank you guys for hopping on board. Guys, we've been on a podcast hiatus. We've been writing the book, but I got introduced to this young man right here, and I was so excited to get a chat with him that we had to bring him on. This is a former Major League Baseball professional player. He's a former cancer survivor and champion, man of faith, motivational speaker, coach, mentor to people. This guy is just has motivation firing out of his breath all the time. I love this guy a lot. Chris, welcome to the pod. How you doing today, young man?
Thanks, brother, man. I'm good. It's good to be here. I'm kind of on a high myself. My oldest daughter just graduated from preschool, so it's one of those life punching you in the face days.
That's always, I remember the first day I dropped my daughter off at preschool, I had a dentist appointment after, and I went and cried at the dentist. I literally was tearing up in the chair, man, because it's like, where does time go? But it's crazy, man. Well, I appreciate you hopping on, man. A lot of stuff I want to get into, but first, can you just tell people a little bit who you are, what you're about, kind of give a rundown for anybody who might follow me but not know who you are, man?
Sure. Chris Vasami. I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up just outside New York City. I have been training baseball and softball players for about 18 years now. We started doing that while I was still playing professional baseball. I played college baseball, played professional baseball. I'm a husband to my wife, Paige. I got two daughters. Lainey's 5. George is almost 4. And I'm a man of faith, big believer. I've been battling cancer now for about 7 years. So everything that's come along with that. And I really do feel like I've lived almost 2 lives, because I had my life as a professional athlete, retired, and then just, a couple of years later got diagnosed with cancer, and what life has looked like ever since the cancer diagnosis. So it's been an interesting life of dichotomy. It's been an interesting life of taking all the skills that I had as a professional baseball player and everything that I used in terms of discipline and goal orientation and consistently putting in the work and showing up for myself, and having to readjust that to a cancer battle and everything that has come along with that. And really life doesn't wait for you to be ready for anything. So it's really a matter of, kind of taking the reins and saying, okay, what am I in control of? And how am I using all my sunny days to prepare for the storm when it comes?
Man, that's a great outlook, man. I love that. Well, so many questions, man. I'd like to start, I guess, with faith. That's the foundation of both of our lives. Were you grow up in a Christian home? Was that always a big part of your life, or kind of how'd you come to faith, and kind of share that if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm Italian Catholic from New York. So, growing up there, you do a 360, throw a rock, and you'll hit a Catholic church. And, it was interesting because I grew up, I'm one of 4 kids. We all did the, CCD and communion, confirmation. And it was interesting because when I got to college, my first out of high school, I went to Notre Dame. So being able to go to Notre Dame and be around people that faith was really important to them. And I didn't understand how big of a part of the school it was until you're there and you're entrenched in it. And, every male dorm has a chapel in it. Every Sunday night at 9:00, there was church, and you and your sister, anybody could come to church, but it was really you and the sister dorm. And it was just one of those things where it's like, hey, you want to come to church dressed up, or you want to come to church in your pajamas? Like, it doesn't matter, man. Just show up, be there.
Awesome.
And so being able to be on campus and really, for the first time in my life, be on my own, but also feel like my dad had done a really good job planting this seed of faith in me, and being able to sit here and say, hey, now you're on your own, please. I know he wasn't saying this at the time, but it was, I hope you continue with it. But, as an adult, you're going to find certain things in certain ways. And so it really was a big part of my life. And it still is a big part of my life. What's interesting, though, is that when I was diagnosed with cancer, all the anger started to come out and all the frustration started to come out. And I had plenty of conversations with God, really just trying to figure out the why. Why was this happening? why was it not going away? Why do I have to have multiple surgeries? Why do I have to go see multiple doctors in different states? And why is my medicine not working? All the whys. And when you take a step back and you start to realize, okay, well, for 2 years, I was the victim. And here I am. And God has shown me so much grace up to that point, even in my victimhood. You have to have this wake up moment. Mm. And it was really, for me, it was a day where it was December in Charlotte and it was cold. And for no apparent reason, I just took my shoes off and I started walking down the street barefoot. And for the first time in about 2 years, I had hope. And I really started to understand that this was not about this. My responsibility was not why this was happening to me. And it was not God's responsibility to give me a reason why. It was now my responsibility to see, how could I react to this situation? What was he trying to test me with? And I'm walking down the street, and for the first time in years, I could feel the sunshine on my face, and it was warm, and I could feel the cold under my feet, and I could hear the birds chirping, and I could hear the wind blowing in the leaves and the trees, and it was like, bro, like, you cannot mess up this opportunity. Like, this is God's grace at its finest, and it's been a very different 5 years ever since then.
And that's beautiful. And I think, it's as cheesy as it sounds, like life's not what happens to you, it's how you see all these posters, right? But it really is, to hear a really successful guy like yourself admit and say, yeah, I had this season of my life where I kind of was a victim or that, but then you made that one choice. And I loved where you said, I stopped asking why and I started asking kind of what are you teaching me, God? What are you, and the mindset through there is really, really powerful, man. And that's awesome, because we all struggle in our faith. I think until we get to heaven, we're just going to go we're on earth, man. We're going to go through seasons of life that are harder than others. And so, especially like a cancer diagnosis got to be one of the hardest things, right, to bounce back from. But that's really inspiring.
For sure. And my cousin is a youth pastor down in Texas, and I would occasionally, reach out to him and we'd talk. And he would say to me, for some perspective, he'd say, Chris, what amazing relationship in your life has just been perfect the whole time?
Not even marriage, right? Like,
right. It's like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you're going to have, when there's so much care and thought going into the relationship, there's always going to be strife. And so it was just, he goes, if you were walking around with this naive faith, as opposed to, we always talk about blind faith, but if you were walking around with this naive faith, I'd be more concerned than you sitting there looking up the sky being like, hey man, what is going on?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. And I love the fact too that you can be kind of raw, and it is a relationship with God. I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. Where it's okay to say, this isn't fair, I don't like this. I've had many angry prayers myself, right? And I think all the Lord wants the same thing we want from our girls or our children, right? Like, crawl on dad's lap, talk about it. Let's kind of grow through it and live that way together. It's a relationship. And so I love that, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Well,
absolutely.
Let me ask a question here, man, because I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I really thought I could make it until I was 14. And then I went off to the summer camps, man, and I realized I'm 5'11" and white, and I'm playing against these guys that are 6'4", and it doesn't matter how skilled I am. Like, I can't compete. That was like sort of the first time. When did you kind of think, it's almost every boy, or a good percentage, they want to be a pro athlete? You made the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that actually did it. When was that time in your life growing up where you thought, I can accomplish this, or kind of walk me through those early stages of, baseball career, and maybe when that happened?
I think what started to click for me was probably around 8th grade. I made varsity as an 8th grader.
Whew.
And
so you're playing 3-4 years up?
Yes.
Wow.
And I was one of the best hitters on the team. And that year, and then the next year as a freshman, and then even that sophomore year, I was on cruise control. Like, it was just very easy for me. And my sophomore year, I made All-State. And my dad looked at me and was like, look, yeah, you made All-State, but I'm going to be honest, this was probably the laziest year you've ever had.
I love dads.
And, right, totally. And me being, a 16-year-old, I was like, what do you know?
Right.
And
Everything
so,
turns out, but yeah.
and into that summer season, and it was a rude awakening. I started out the year 1 for 31 in my summer year. And it was, the worst part is that I wish I would have struck out like half the time, because then at least I would have figured out like there was something wrong. Like I was hitting the ball, but I just couldn't hit it hard, and it just kept going right at somebody. And it was just one of those weird moments. And so I called up my hitting coach and I said, hey, we need to hit. And we hit like 3 or 4 days in a row. My hands were bleeding. And it was just this mental shift that went from like, hey man, you had success, but you don't even know how you had success. So now like we have to understand how to have success. And it just became very process oriented, and everything was about the work and the approach. And if the results were going to be what they were. And I ended up, the rest of that year, I hit so well that I ended up setting the single season batting average record for my summer team, even after starting 1 for 31. And that's the summer that everything really clicked, where it was like, okay, man, like when you put the work in, like things can be special. And that was just that. From that point on, nothing was going to stop me at all. And it was almost, you end up getting a little bit more of a chip on your shoulder, because then you start to realize the disrespect that the Northeast gets when it comes to baseball. And so then I'm traveling the country, and I'm going down to Florida, I'm going to Texas, I go out to California, and it's the top 150 guys in the country, and they just like, is there even baseball in New York? And so, you start to, and it just builds this kind of chip, and it helps you understand, like, look, man, here you are working out in an indoor cage in December, January, February, even March, and people are already playing, they're on the field. So you knew that somebody could potentially have an upper hand on you just based off of the environment that they were in. So I always had the idea, like, I'm never going to let anybody work harder than me who I know. And so that's when everything started to kind of come together. And I ended up going to Notre Dame out of high school. We were top 2 in the country. I was one of the top recruits. I was an All-American in high school. And then the coach and I, after my freshman year, we just didn't agree on my future. So I transferred down to North Carolina at Elon University, and ended up getting drafted out of there and played pro ball. And it was a really cool experience, because as your career starts to wind down, you go through an identity crisis for sure. Because your whole life was, I'm a baseball player, I'm a baseball player, I'm a baseball player. And then the career starts to end. And instead of just saying who you are in the moment, then it's, well, I used to play baseball. I'm a former professional baseball player. It's like, okay, cool. But yeah, what do you actually do? It's like, oh, well. And so for about a year, it was hard, man. It was an identity crisis for sure, because you wanted something so bad, and it just wasn't in the cards for you from a business perspective. Maybe you weren't good enough, whatever the reasons were. And so one day, the day that it actually clicked for me was, I had already started giving lessons, and I had a person come in, and we were talking, and they had no clue I'd played professional baseball. And so it then dawned on me, it was like, man, like, people are not calling you to coach their sons and daughters because you were a professional baseball player. They're calling you because you're a good mentor, you're a coach. You help these kids understand that the parallels of life and ball, and if you put the work in, you'll get what you put out. And that was the day that I was like, yeah, man, this is my path now.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. I go back to that summer of, when you were 15 or whatever, 16, and starting 1 for 31, and then you set the record. That'll probably never be broken, man. There's some records are like just never be broken, but it sounds like that's the moment where you really learned how you coach now, like all about the process. And I'm so fascinated by baseball, especially. I love baseball growing up. And it's a game where you have to be irrationally have this deep self-belief. Because if you're great, you get out 7 out of 10 times, right?
Right.
I love that you coach, and we talked a little bit off the platform about you have to coach to the process, because there's nothing else. And so can you kind of walk us through like how you teach and how you coach, and what's your typical clients like now? What's your day-to-day life kind of look like with coaching in that process, man?
the first thing that you have to do is you have to understand the individual that is in front of you. And whether that's my baseball and softball clients or my nutrition clients, anybody who I'm coaching or consulting with, I really want to get to know the individual that's in front of me. I always tell them, look, I'm on your team. And so when I sit there and I really want to take a deep dive into who you are and how you work and how you process, it's only helping me, because then I get to teach you the best I possibly can. And then I'm going to understand how to relay information, communicate, whether it's more verbal or whether it's more, physical, or whether it's just a demonstration, whatever it is. Like, these are all things that are going to help me help you. And at the end of the day, I tell all my clients, we build some amazing relationships, and I'm so grateful for it. But I always have to remind them, the day we met, we did not have this relationship. So we met under the understanding that you were here for me to help you. And so that's where I'm always going to be drawing my inspiration from. And so when I'm working with kids, whether it's a 7 or an 8-year-old who's, super talented, or maybe they're afraid of the ball, or I got a 16, 17-year-old who's, a Division I caliber player, but let's just say they're struggling at the time. To me, it's all about going back to the basics and expectations. And I think that's where we get in trouble a lot as humans, is we have these unrealistic expectations. And so I never want my people to visualize the outcome. I always want them to visualize the actions that they have to take to eventually get the outcome at some point.
It's a big switch.
And so when we're talking about the swing, or we're talking about the approach, or we're talking about trying to find more ways to get protein in your diet, all these things have to be looked at and seen, kind of like, where's the puzzle coming together? What piece is missing? What piece is maybe out of place? And helping them just have these perspective moments where they're shifting their mindset from, I got out or I got a hit. Because either one, you can get out in the best way possible, man. You can sit there and get a great pitch and smash a ball, and the guy catches it, and that's baseball. At the same time, you can get a broken bat hit over the first baseman, and like, you're not a good hitter. That's just called luck. And so I always want them to understand that the process and the work, that's the thing that we're always leaning on. And that's also the thing that we're always going to be tweaking.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. And it even goes back to where you were, to where you just fell in love with that process. I think it's really cool, Chris, how I can tell, like, the pitch in your voice changes when you talk about your clients. Like, you want them to win probably as bad as they want to win. I can tell that just from talking to you. And I always say to a lot of the people that I've coached to in the past, and my coach, who's Zach Hommel, who changed my life 6 years ago when I first hired him as a mentor, he would say things to me in a way that I probably already knew somewhere in me. It wasn't like we were reinventing the wheel. I just needed somebody with an aerial view to help me make sense of it and sort of give me a clear vision and things like that. And I love that you don't make it, hey man, I'm a pro ball player and I'm going to do 20 things that you've never heard of. No, we're going to master the basics. We're going to fall in love with the process, right? So you coach all ages then? You'll take young kids, older kids, just wherever they're at?
Yeah, wherever they're at, whatever their goals are, that's where we start.
Man, that's awesome, dude. I love that. Well, let me back you up a little bit too, because I got a couple questions just about pro ball, because I find it really interesting. What's life like? First off, you get drafted and you're like, okay, I'm once you get drafted, do you still have to try out for the team, or what's that look like, I guess?
Once you get drafted, you get assigned to a team, and you're play out that season, and hopefully you can play well enough and enough pieces fit where you can move up in the ranks. For some people, it is still a business at the end of the day. So for somebody who gets drafted in the first couple rounds and they're getting, $1 million signing bonus, that's a big investment on the team's part in that person. So that person is going to get, as they should, they're going to get every opportunity to fail. Whereas some people who are drafted lower, if you miss your shot, then, that's probably all that was in for you. But so that's why for me, being a little bit lower drafted guy, as the writing on the wall started to come in, I was able to shift my mindset from I have to make it to the major leagues to bro, do you see who you're surrounded by between the players who eventually will one day make it to the majors, or just all the coaching that you're around, good and bad. So I was taking stuff from coaches that I was like, yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's awesome. That's something I want to do one day. And at the same time, there's a tons of coaches out there who you're looking at them going, how'd you even get this job? Because your communication skills are awful. And you just keep telling me to do the same thing and it's not working. Whereas, that's one of the things that I take is, that's why I said, it really is about the individual who's in front of me. So if I have 10 kids in front of me, well, if I only know how to explain it one way, well, that's probably going to relate to 2 out of the 10 kids there. I don't look at the other 8 kids and go, sorry, y'all, shit out of luck. It's my job to sit there and understand, how are they going to accept the information that I'm trying to get across to them? And that's what I love about coaching.
That's awesome. Can I ask you a question, Chris? Do you feel like God used everything in your path in your life and had, when he created you and he said, man, Chris is going to be a coach someday. I'm going to use him to inspire and pour into people. That's the way it seems to me talking. Do you feel that way when you look back at your life?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's what has allowed me to have the perspective that I do, and to not, there were plenty of times, man, where I've gotten overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, and it's always gotten me nowhere. And it's not a matter of being like, I had, the girl who cuts my hair, she's been cutting my hair for years. She said to me the other day, she's like, do you get mad? I was like, I get frustrated. I want to say, I don't know if I get mad anymore, because it's just a matter of, I try not to, because again, it's just more of a wasted energy for me. But yes, there are so many things that I've gone through. All right, I'll give you a perfect example. So about a year ago, I had like the worst 9 days of my life, and specifically in this situation that I've been dealing with. I slept about 27 hours in 9 days. So about 3 hours a night. Some nights I didn't even sleep at all. And I woke up on day 5. Actually, I went to sleep on day 5, and I took an Ambien to try to help me sleep. And I woke up after 34 minutes in total dread. And so I went downstairs, and I thought it was over, man. I thought I was going to end it. And it was God's grace just pushing me right back up the stairs. And I went, and I would just kneel and pray by my wife's bed. And then I would kneel by my daughter's bed. And then my little one was still in a crib at that time. So I'm putting my hands through the slats in the crib, and I'm just holding on to her and praying. I just prayed for 4 straight days. Like, that's just what I did. And so I started to get a little bit relief, and went to a doctor and got on some sleeping medicines to help me sleep and get a little bit normal and regulated again. And so I started to do a deep rabbit hole into people who have severe hypothyroidism like I do, and what that does to your gut and your brain connection and serotonin levels and all that. I just kept seeing serotonin. Well, come to find out that people who suffer, like, serotonin struggles to be secreted and made, no matter how well you eat and anything like that. So I called up my oncologist, and I said, can you send me a hormonal test kit? She said, yeah, sure. Send it back. She's like, you're absolutely right. Serotonin is super low. You're probably using it all in the first part of the day, which would explain why, and for people who don't know what serotonin is, it's your happy hormone. It's the hormone that gives you joy and peace and rational thoughts and regulation. And so that would explain why I would have one negative thought and spiral for 3 days into total anxiety and paranoia and things like that. So I got on an SSRI, called my doctor, and from a mental armor standpoint, it's been the best year of my life, year and change of my life. And so I tell that story because I want people to understand how important it is to advocate for yourself, and to be able to, when you're, and here I am, I work out 5-6 days a week. So I have all this physical armor, but my mental armor wasn't there. And so, but when something's not right, like, you got to push for yourself. You got to fight for yourself. You got to advocate for yourself, whether it's with doctors, people at work, bosses, spouses, friends, like whatever. I mean, there's a huge confidence that comes with knowing what you want and need and being able to go advocate for yourself. And so for me, that is a heavy story of advocacy. but it's still something that I had to learn. And so I joke with people is that God gave me that test. So that way, when I have my high school kids come in and they're struggling to ask a girl out on a date, I can be like, bro, this is cake, man. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. This is how we're going to have confidence. You're going to advocate for yourself. You're going to go up to her and you're going to say, look, I'm sorry I waited so long to ask you to prom, but I'm not waiting any longer. We're going to go for ice cream on Saturday night. And like, that's how we're going to do it. So in a roundabout way, that's how I really take, the test that God has given me and sit there and say, how can I go out and share this with the world?
Man, it's really beautiful in a lot of ways. I think, you develop a bulletproof mindset when you start to look at those terrible events that happen in your life, sort of like, let's cancer, a 1 for 31 slump. You've told me 3 stories now, can't sleep for 9 days. And you're at the end of all those, you're like, best thing that happened because now I can use those. And I always say, like, man, you don't get a testimony without a test. You don't get a message without a mess. And so a lot of times when you're in that season of struggle, he's chiseling you. But here's the key, man. You didn't turn to alternate things. You didn't turn to pornography or these other things. You turned to the Lord. You prayed to him. And I think, man, if somebody's listening to this out here, man, it's like a guy would probably look at you on the outside. I did, I'll be honest. And this Chris guy got everything, man. He probably never had a problem in his life. Pro ball player, handsome guy, like coach, you can just down the list, right? This guy probably never had a problem. Somebody look on the outside. And this is what I love about, getting to know people and even coaching. You learn that God, these people we look up to and admire, they're no different than you or I or anybody we might look at. They went through some fires, and oftentimes people of faith, especially, man, they leaned into God and they grew through them. And so sounds like that. If I had to sum up a lot of the story of your life, man, that's it. You went through a lot of
man.
and you grew fires. And now, man, I think this is the greatest thing that we can do as humans is you've used that gift to pour back into people and help other people through that. And that's amazing, man.
Well, I think, it seems, it's interesting because our nervous system it's complex, but our nervous system would always choose a comfortable hell over an unknown heaven. Which is why we fall back into those habits, regardless. It doesn't matter. It's a shitty habit. It's a shitty lifestyle. It's a shitty spouse. It's a shitty relationship, but it's comfortable. So we would choose that. And the reason why we won't choose an unknown heaven is just for that reason. It's uncomfortable. I don't know it. I've never been there. So I'm constantly telling my clients, and my players, like, push through it. Literally get through it. The obstacle is the way. Lean into the darkness. Don't run from it, because there is something not only to be learned from it, but also you're going to build these new neurological pathways in your brain that it's like a new roadmap to understand, like, no, the next time you are presented with something that is hard, challenging, your brain's going to remember, oh shit, I already went through something like this before. Like, there's no quit. And so it is one of those things where, it's my way of having a sense of humor around it, is that I like to think that God has a sense of humor, where it seems like every time I think I've got it figured out, like, and my faith gets deeper, like I have a brand new, harder test, like, right around the corner.
Man, isn't that the truth, man? I lead a lot of men's retreats, and I always tell guys going home on them, we always pray, and the last thing I say is, dude, you're on fire right now. Expect the enemy to come knocking. He doesn't like that, and there's gonna be trials down the road. I always joke too, man, and I love the way you said that. A new neurological pathway is formed, and you do that by doing what you say you're gonna do as a guy and building those disciplined habits in, man. But I don't even think human beings would be here if we didn't choose the path of least resistance. It's like 5,000 years ago, however long you want to say humans were here, right? If they didn't know whether to cross the river or not, and they had to play it safe because there might be crocodiles. That's probably why we're still here as a species. But you have to understand, in today's world, those unknowns aren't as scary as like a warring tribe or, wild animals. It's pushing yourself. We're so comfortable now in life, man, that you have to step outside that comfort zone and make yourself do those things.
Well, I was listening to somebody just the other day talk about, talk about perspective. 50 years ago, there weren't hot showers.
That's crazy, man.
So
that's wild.
So some of these men and some of these people that we look up to who lived, 75, 100, 150 years ago, we're like, bro, they never even got to take a cold shower. Like let's have some perspective once in a while. Like, so next time you're in a nice warm shower, like that is the utmost time to sit there and be like, gosh, I am so grateful that I'm living right now.
Dude, it's funny you mentioned that. I'd put myself through the fire, like weights, and I get up really early every day and I run wind sprints in the heat. But I'm like a sissy. I live in Vegas, like 110 out here. I hate the cold. So when I'm really being a puss, like a pansy, I'll always say to myself, if you don't turn this around today, I'm making you take a cold shower tomorrow. And I've done it
totally.
I just hate it. And so that's always my way of like making a deal with myself. All right, man, we're going to get back on track, or I'm going to make you get in that cold shower. Kind of a deal.
100%.
That's funny, man. Well, tell me a little bit about like dad life, your day-to-day life too, man. What's kind of your schedule look like? You wake up, you do the dad thing. Do you have clients scheduled in through the day? Is a lot of your clients, how do they find you, I guess? Is it more in person or is it online or both, or what's that look like?
It's a little bit of both. I would say most of my training clients, my in-person training clients, is by the grace of God, it's all word of mouth. I've been, lucky enough. Yeah, because and I think because like I don't coach any teams. I'm a one-on-one coach. I believe in the power of quality work over time, and so the games that we play are just really data points along the way to help us understand if what we're doing is working or where the disconnect is. And for most people, the disconnect is they physically get the work done and then they mentally, have a disconnect in the game that doesn't allow the physical to come out at some point. So all that is definitely in-person stuff is all word of mouth. The nutrition stuff is a little bit of both. I'd say I have, probably half my clients are in Charlotte and then half my clients are out of state. And they same thing, either word of mouth or LinkedIn and the biggest piece with my nutrition stuff is I'm a big believer in accountability. So I'm really your accountability partner. Everybody says to me, "Oh, I've done everything." And I go, "Well, you haven't done everything yet." Okay. So I'm not the nutritionist who's going to sit there and give you a meal plan and say, "Hey, I'll see you in 30 days for your check-in." Like we are talking almost every day. We are, we have our weigh-ins twice a week. Because this is about a life. This is a lifestyle. Yes, I have a couple of people I have a kid who's a college golfer, and I have people who are trying to perform and run marathons and things like that. But for the most part, people are trying to live the life that they are picturing that they physically just can't get to yet. So it's okay. I had one of my clients the other day. She was like, "Hey, I know I'm supposed to weigh in on Friday. Is it okay if I weigh in on Thursday because we haven't had a babysitter in a long time. My husband and I haven't gone on a date in a long time, and it's Mother's Day weekend." I said, "Yeah, of course. Like, please go ahead." But because we've done so much good work together and she's improved so much more than she even gives herself credit for, she went out Thursday night, had a great night, was allowed herself to have a drink because we live a flexible, lifestyle where like, and the next day she woke up and weighed in and lost 2 pounds that week. So it's like, so it's just, it's being able to have those experiences to sit there and be like, whoa, okay, I'm actually doing better than I thought I was. There's nothing to be scared of. And I can still live my life. And that's what this is about at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah. Adding to your life, man. Nobody wants to live a restrictive. You got to weigh every single thing. You can never have it. If you're not trying to be a pro athlete, especially, like you need to balance that. And I think that's super healthy. I love the fact that you check in clients daily and like, again, your pitch goes, you want them to win. It's so obvious, man. When I talk to you, I think that's a really cool thing. And I think something that a lot of people just need in life and the value of a coach is, everybody needs somebody in their corner to root for them. And I think if, you think back to like, you even hear pro athletes say, what do they miss the most about the game? It's like usually not even the game or the lights or the fans. It's like that camaraderie. That like, dude, maybe you got 2 outs in a row, but somebody's building you up when you come back and, hey, you hit the ball on the nose next time, man. Hey, putting in the work. Great job, man. And there's so many people that I've talked to over the last 4 or 5 years of coaching and on Twitter and the space I'm in that like, literally I encourage them and they're like, you're the first person in 2 decades that's told me good job. That you're proud of me. And that makes people want to go to new levels. And then you add the accountability piece where now they can check in with you. They can bounce ideas off you. It's invaluable, man. I joke with my first coach that I stole from him. The ROI on what he gave me to my life is like 1000%, man. Like, way higher. So I absolutely love that. What piece of advice would you give, Chris, to a lot of guys that watch this podcast, or like we just say like middle-aged dads, right? Maybe they're just in a point in life where they used to be really athletic, but jobs, kids, life, they're just comfortable. A lot of times that happens. What advice would you give to somebody like that? Maybe they're 30, 40 pounds overweight. They've got this image in their head of the dad they want to be or the guy they want to be, but they just haven't, those neural pathways aren't quite formed yet. What would be your piece of advice to guys like that?
So the first thing I would do is I would sit down and take some real inventory on my life, and let it be the spiritual faith inventory, inventory on yourself, inventory on you as a spouse, as a father, as a friend, as a coworker, and then on your business or your work or whatever it is, and have a real conversation with yourself. And the thing is, though, I had a young 28-year-old ask me the other day. He said, man, he goes, every time I sit down to take inventory, I feel like I get distracted and it just ends up not happening. You have any advice? I said, when's the last time you missed a meeting with your boss? He goes, well, never. I go, then why are you okay missing a meeting with yourself?
Yeah.
Like, put it on your calendar, Sunday night at 5:30. Like, give yourself a reminder. Like, boom, that's it. Block it off. Like, because it's important.
Yes.
And so, and that leads me into my next point, is that once you take this inventory, and hopefully it's a realistic conversation and you're being real with yourself, from that, you should be able to pinpoint 3, 4, 5 priorities that are going to be the non-negotiables of your life every day now. And so for me, I work out 6 days a week. I have to, because my disease is going to do whatever it wants. So I got to be able to be on par with it, and sometimes stay a step ahead of it. Not only that, but I also just love it. I enjoy it. I love the idea of choosing hard before, life chooses hard for me. So 6 days a week, I'm working out, and there's so many men out there where their job is number one. And, I got to bring home the money and I got to bring home the bread. And I totally appreciate that. But where are you in building this personal operating system for yourself? So that way, when you are on a business trip, you just happen to be in a different place, still with the same non-negotiables, same with the same priorities. So that way, weeks can turn into months and months into seasons. Whereas I know so many people where, because they're at home base and it's comfortable, well, I get things done, and then I'm on the road for 2 days, and then I come home for 3, and then I'm back on the road. And my spirituality is really important to me, but yet I never go to church because my son always has a baseball game every Sunday. It's like, again, we're not aligned right now. And so that's where the disconnect comes in, and that's where the frustration comes in. And because we get overwhelmed by the lack of alignment, that's when we just kind of shut down.
Man.
So I really urge people to find those non-negotiables. And if after 3 or 4 or 5 priorities, you realize there's no other room in your life for the other 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then that's totally okay. That's the answer. It's a season of life, man.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I can provide for my family. I can be the best father I can be. I want to make sure I tell my kids I love them as much as I possibly can. Sundays are family days. It's church. It's spending time together. It's catching up on the time that I missed with them during the week. It's date nights with my wife to help her understand that we started this family first, just me and you, before the kids ever came.
Preach.
And and being able to have those date nights and have those conversations and still be intimate, and let her know how how sexually attracted I still am to her, and how much she means to me, while also sitting there and saying, hey, look, I still need my relationship with God, because without him, I'm nothing. Without him, we're nothing. Without him, my family's nothing. So being able to be okay feeling like you're doing everything you can because those are the things that are important to you, and not feeling like you need to appease anybody else.
Yeah. Man, that's so true. And it's, again, nobody's going to advocate for you. You mentioned it a half hour ago. I remember when I first got married, I needed you to fire me up back then, man. My first couple of years of marriage, I got promoted several times and I thought I was doing the right thing as a man. Like I worked 6 days a week, even though I didn't have to. My branch, I managed a bank and it was performing well. I was on the brink of divorce. I'd gained 20 pounds. I wasn't home. When I was angry and not my best self. And it took me kind of getting to that rock bottom point almost to realize, again, what you said, nobody's going to advocate for yourself. And I did exactly what you said, actually, just intuitively. I said, what do I want to win at in life? And I remember writing that down, faith. Okay, well, right now I give God about 45 minutes a week. I watch sports about 25 hours and Netflix 20 hours. Am I aligned there or not? Right. And so maybe I need to switch some things around. And I haven't taken my wife on a date in 2 years, but I always find time for my buddies at the bar. Maybe I need to shift around some priorities. And so it's great to constantly audit yourself and ask yourself those questions, or better yet, have a mentor, somebody that's been through it that can walk you through those things and help you align that perfect vision with where you want your life to go. So you're not a passenger just kind of going where people take you. You're driving the car. You're intentionally moving it every day towards the life that you want.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, life's about moving dirt. And some days we have a shovel and some days we have a teaspoon. But just because you wake up that day and you have a teaspoon, and like, we don't get to shut it down.
Yeah.
It's just understanding that what is that day going to look like?
Right.
And this life is interesting because your best moments will actually be better than you ever thought they could be. But on the flip side, my worst moments are worse than I ever thought they could be. But it's really about the other 80% of the time, making sure that life is what I absolutely need it to be and what I want it to be.
I love that, man. That's awesome. Well, yeah, Dom, who introduced us. Shout out to Dom. I love this guy, man. He's one of my favorite humans on earth. He's just such a great dude. We have this saying where it's like no zeros, and that reminds me of your teaspoon analogy. Some days, man, you're a busy dad. You've got a lot going on. Some days, man, the workouts for me are like 300 push-ups in between calls. I don't have time for anything else. It's what I'm going to hit that day, right? It's just that's the way it is. But you don't put up zeros. You dig as hard as you can with that teaspoon. I love that analogy, man. Well, Chris, I want to help you in any way I can. If anybody's watched this and they vibe with you, where can people find you on social media? How could they reach out to you? Tell us some ways to find you, and we'll provide all of Chris's links below as well.
I'll give you the LinkedIn, but you can find me at Christopher Vasami, I think, on LinkedIn. My Instagram is at Chris Vasami, Vasami. If anybody's interested in coaching, nutrition coaching, or even just coaching, life coaching, holistic lifestyle coaching, they can find me at vasamimethod.com. And but also, man, like, feel free to throw my number out there too, man. One of my biggest pillars that I stand on, one of my non-negotiables, is human connection. And the ability to make real conversation with people. Because going back to what you were saying before, I mean, but besides the fact that our money is green and our blood is red, like, we all struggle. Like, that is what we do. And so it's a matter of having that empathy, that sympathy, and that understanding and that perspective to sit there and be like, okay, like, how can I relate to the next person next to me? And I really just think that in today's day and age, everything is so transactional. Everything has a condition attached to it. And I want to be the opposite. I want to turn every transaction into an interaction, and I want life to be as unconditional as possible. And I have no problem planting trees, knowing I might never get to sit in their shade, and that's okay.
I love that, man, so much. Right before I hopped on this call, I literally lifted with two guys off Twitter, one from Switzerland, another from, I forget where he's from, some of the States, maybe Tennessee. He's from Tennessee. And these are just guys that I follow on Twitter. I think I've met 800 or 900 people now off Twitter. That I live in Vegas, so people are always traveling here. I'm the same as you, man. Even though I'm grateful we can connect virtually, and I would never get the chance to meet or talk to a guy like you if we lived 50 years ago, say. It's awesome, and I'm grateful for that. Nothing beats putting your feet on grass, going and working out with a buddy, I just took an hour and a half walk with a friend, a guy that's from Switzerland, and just chat life. And to me, that's like the greatest gift of life, is that human connection too, man. And it's quite obvious you have that as well, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. I get to go do the dad thing here in 2 minutes, scoop up my kids from school, but I really appreciate you taking time, man. Any last words you want to give to the people, my man?
No, I appreciate the time, and anybody who ever wants to have a conversation, please reach out.
Awesome, man. Again, we're going to post all of Chris's links below. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It's Tyrompers No Limit Podcast, episode number 97. Go be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Bless up. Let's go change the world today, guys. Have the greatest day. Thanks for tuning in.